For years, my stepmother made my life miserable with her cruel behavior. When it was time for a special event, I made the decision not to invite her, and my dad's furious reaction caught me by surprise. What happened next? My name is Natalie. I am 27 years old. In a few weeks, I will marry. I'm currently sitting at my kitchen table looking at a sea of wedding invitations. I go over the names to ensure I haven't overlooked anyone important. However, there is one name that I intentionally left off the list. My stepmother's. You might be wondering how I could have invited my stepmother to my own wedding, and I understand that. This is a lengthy story. Then this seems like an appropriate time to tell it. I was 5 years old when it all started. When my parents divorced, everything in my life fell apart. They told me that I would switch between the two of them while living with them. I thought it was fantastic at the time because I couldn't choose between my parents, and I adored them both. I didn't have to be this way at first. Life after the divorce wasn't so bad. My father and I used to go on these incredible road trips together because he owned the company. He could take time off whenever he felt like it. We would get into his car and drive to different cities. As a child, I felt a sense of adventure as I explored new places with my father. Things were different, but still wonderful, while I was with my mother. We'd spend hours playing with my dolls, making up stories for each one, and the house would often smell like freshly baked cookies. Those were joyful times. I sensed that both of my parents valued, loved, and desired me. Then again, everything was different. When I was 7 years old, my father remarried. I recall the day my father took me to meet Sarah, who will soon become my stepmother. Her grin seemed to fill the entire room, and her beautiful blonde hair accentuated her beauty. First, everything was fine. Sarah treated me with kindness and genuine concern. When I was at Dad's house, she taught me how to braid my hair and helped me with my homework. However, over time, something changed. Sarah desired to have her own children, but she was unable to conceive. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, I now understand how it affected her. Sarah's opinion of me completely changed. She used to be friendly and welcoming, but these days it felt like she despised me for being here. She seemed to despise me because I was born when she was unable to have her own children. It wasn't clear to me at the time. When I was younger, I had no idea what had gone wrong for my stepmother to suddenly dislike me so much. Sarah's attitude toward me simply worsened over time. She appeared to have decided to live for herself in case she was unable to have her own children. There was no place for me in that existence. After returning from my mother's, I noticed some changes. Dad and Sarah would be relaxed and tanned, bursting with stories about their travels during my absence. I eventually lost the ability to control myself. Dad, why don't we take trips like we used to? He looked at Sarah and seemed uneasy before responding, Things are no longer the same, honey. We also need to consider Sarah's timetable. Natalie, you are old enough to understand that adults require their own time. Sarah spoke in a stern tone. Avoid being self-centered. I had a slap-like sensation. Is it self-serving to want to hang out with my father? It wasn't just the travels, though. Everything changed when I was at my father's house. Sarah had imposed new rules on me, and they all appeared to be designed to keep me hidden from view. Natalie, she would say, appearing to be quite pleasant. How about you go and play in your room? Adults are conversing. I tried to protest at first, but I want to be out here with you and Dad. Sarah averted her gaze. Your father and I require some quiet time. Is asking too much. As a result, I would withdraw to my room, feeling less like a daughter living with her father, and more like a prisoner every day. The list of demands grew longer. Avoid making noise, speaking too loudly, playing energetic games and laughing too loudly. It was far worse than living in a library. I was giggling at a funny TV show in the living room one day with a crimson face. Sarah stormed inside. She asked, "What did I tell you about being quiet?" But I was only laughing. She interrupted me. "What you were laughing at is irrelevant to me. I give you rules to follow in this house. Recognize?" I nodded, suppressing my emotions. Yes, Sarah. Good, she muttered as she turned to leave. Now return to your room and stay there until dinner. Dad didn't seem to be aware of anything, or perhaps he chose not to notice it. He would ignore me whenever I mentioned how Sarah was treating me. No, "She's just adjusting to it," he would remark. "Give her time." However, time did not improve matters. All it did was make Sarah more open about her dislike for me. She'd criticize everything I did, including my diet and appearance. "Natalie, really? Is there no way you can chew with your mouth closed while sitting upright? You appear to have grown up in a barn." I wanted to shout to let her know that I was just a child doing my best. However, I knew it would be ineffective. Sarah believed that my entire being was a transgression. As a result, I learned how to be quiet, small, and unobtrusive in my father's home. I became like a ghost. When it came time to return to my mother's house, I felt like I could breathe again because I avoided making a fuss and drawing attention every 2 weeks. But I was always afraid of returning to Dad's house and seeing Sarah's icy expressions and stern remarks. I was able to suppress my emotions for many years. But by the time I was 12, I had reached my breaking point. After a particularly unpleasant interaction with Sarah, I sobbed and told Mom everything one day, using each phrase. Mom quote-s expression deepened as she listened. She erupted when I finished. I jumped when she cried. "That thing. How dare she treat my daughter this way?" Mom was on the phone with Dad before I could stop her. She has never sounded angrier to me. She spat into the telephone. "Listen up, you spineless excuse for a father. If you don't get your wife under control, I promise to take you to court and make sure you never see Natalie again." I felt ill. I just wanted things to be better, not worse. This was not what I wanted. A few days later, when I returned to Dad's house, he sat me down for a serious conversation. "Natalie, he began, his tone stern. "We need to talk about your behavior. Sarah has been nothing but kind to you. She's doing her best to be a good stepmother, but all you do is complain." I couldn't believe what I heard. "But, Dad, enough," he snapped. "Do you understand what you have done? Your mother has threatened to take away my visitation rights. Do you want that? Do you want never to see me again?" Tears welled in my eyes. "No, absolutely not." Dad's voice softened. "David, then you must stop this, Natalie. No more complaints about Sarah. She only wants the best for you. If you keep doing this, you will eventually tear this family apart. Is this what you want?" I shook my head, unable to speak through my tears, as he exited the room. I felt as if my world had crumbled. Dad not only didn't believe me, but he also made me feel like everything was my fault. I was the problem, not Sarah. Since that day, I have stopped complaining. I decided to be the ideal stepdaughter, to do whatever Sarah wanted so I wouldn't lose my father. I became a shadow in the house, silent and obedient. I had no say over anything, but at least I could see my father. Even though he appeared to become more of a stranger with each passing day, life at Mom's house was quite different. Mom met Robert a few years after her divorce from his father. He was kind, funny, and had his own daughter, Lily, who was 1 year younger than me. I eventually fell in love with both of them. Robert never attempted to replace my father, but he was always present for me. He helped me with my homework, listened to my concerns, and even showed me how to ride a bike, something Dad had always been too preoccupied to do. Lily became the sister I didn't know I wanted. We stay up late, giggling and revealing secrets. She never made me feel like an outsider. As I grew older, the contrast between my two homes became more pronounced. Her father's. I was a ghost, trying not to disrupt the delicate balance. At Mom's, I was Natalie, loud, funny, and loved. As I entered adolescence, my needs naturally increased. Just like any other kid my age, I wanted the latest gadgets, a cool smartphone, and a good laptop for schoolwork. Dad, to his credit, appeared to understand this. He had always been generous, and at first he didn't hesitate to purchase what I needed. I recall the day he handed me my first smartphone, but my joy was short-lived. Sarah's disapproving expression said it all. Later that night, I overheard their argument. "You are spoiling her, Tom," Sarah hissed. "Do you have an idea how much that phone costs? She needs it for school." Dad's defense was weak. "Please, she needs it to upload selfies and waste time on social media. You are throwing money away." From that day forward, Sarah identified herself as the family's financial guardian. She told her father that she would help him save money. When it came to my expenses, this essentially meant that she took control of everything. The next time I needed new clothes, Sarah insisted on doing it herself. What followed was a parade of secondhand clothing and footwear, all except for discount websites and clearance sales. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against secondhand items, but Sarah took it too far. More often than not, the clothes were ill-fitting, out of style, or simply uncomfortable. But I didn't dare to complain. I still remember my father's warning about tearing the family apart. It was ironic that I was forced to wear hand-me-downs. Sarah never skimped on herself. Her wardrobe was a fashion magazine come to life. Designer shoes and branded bags, clothing from the most recent collections. She'd spend hours primping in front of the mirror, adjusting her perfectly coordinated ensembles. Things came to a head when I graduated from high school. Dad promised me a car, nothing fancy, just something to help me get around. I was over the moon. Finally, evidence that he still cared, that he regarded me as more than just an inconvenience in his new life. But Sarah, true to form, couldn't let that happen. The night before we were supposed to go car shopping, all hell broke loose. "A car!" Sarah shrieked. "Are you out of your mind, Tom? We cannot afford it. Besides, I need a new car. Mine is nearly 3 years old." I listened in my room, my heart sinking with each word. I knew how it would end. The next morning, Dad came to me with that expression on his face. He said he was about to disappoint me again. "Natalie, honey," he began without meeting my gaze above the car. I saved him the trouble. "It's okay, Dad, I understand. We cannot afford it, correct?" He appeared relieved that he did not have to say it himself. Right? But hey, I promise to pay for any college you want to attend as well as your accommodations. How's that sound? He forced a smile. "Sounds great, Dad. Thanks." As he left my room, I heard Sarah's voice downstairs. "Tom, dear, when are we going to look at that new Jeep?" I wanted, so I sat in my room full of ill-fitting clothes, clutching my outdated phone and fantasizing about a car I'd never have. I realized that the material things were not what hurt the most. That was what they represented. Every secondhand shirt, every rejected request, every broken promise was another way of saying, "You aren't worth it, Natalie." When it came time to choose a college, I spent a lot of time researching my options. I finally found one that seemed ideal. Great program. The campus is beautiful and conveniently located near home. I was overjoyed when I was accepted, but when Sarah saw the tuition fees, all hell broke loose. "Are you kidding me?" she screeched, her face flushing red. "This constitutes highway robbery." Dad attempted to calm her down. "Now, Sarah, we promised." "I don't care what we promised," Sarah said, practically foaming at the mouth. "We, quote, not paying that much for her. A 4-year party." She stormed off, returning with a handful of brochures. She thrust them at Dad. "These colleges are far more reasonable, and they're further away. It will teach her about independence." And just like that, my dreams were crushed again. I ended up attending Sarah's chosen college. Yes, it was cheaper, but it was also a long way from everything and everyone I knew. Mom and Robert were overjoyed when they learned I was going to college. They were unaware of this behind-the-scenes drama, and I didn't have the heart to explain why I had burdened them with my problems. Despite everything, I immersed myself in my studies. I was determined to take advantage of this opportunity, even if it wasn't exactly what I had hoped for. I quote, come home for holidays and divide my time between Mom's welcoming house and Dad's house. During one of these breaks, everything came to a head. Sarah was having a birthday party, and to my surprise, Dad called and invited me to attend. "Sarah would love to see you," he said, but I could hear uncertainty in his voice. I was skeptical, but a small part of me hoped that things would change. So I agreed. I even bought Sarah a gift, a nice scarf that I had saved up for through my part-time job at college. When I arrived at the house, the party was in full swing. I took a deep breath before approaching Sarah. "Gift in hand. Happy birthday, Sarah," I said with a forced smile. "I hope you enjoyed it." I never managed to finish. Sarah's face was contorted with rage. "What are you doing here?" she hissed loudly enough that nearby guests could hear. I stammered, confused. "But Dad told me you wanted me to come." "Get out," she screamed. "You aren't welcome here. How dare you turn up and ruin my party?" I stood there frozen with shock. The room had become silent. All eyes are on us. Sarah snatched the gift from my hands and threw it in a nearby trash can without looking. I do not want anything from you. You are not worthy to be here with my friends. Leave now. Tears stung my eyes as I turned to flee. I dashed up to my old room, retrieving the few belongings I had left behind over the years. As I reached for the front door, I could hear Sarah's laughter floating from the living room, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just publicly humiliated her stepdaughter and discarded a heartfelt gift. I slammed the door behind me and walked away from that house for the last time, as I had promised myself. I went straight to Mom's, where I finally broke down and told her everything. All the years of mistreatment, manipulation, and broken promises. Mom was infuriated, but more than anything, she was heartbroken for me. "Oh, sweetie," she said this while holding me close. "I had no idea. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that alone." As I cried in my mother's arms, I experienced a strange combination of sadness and relief. I quote, "Mem sad for the relationship I'll probably never have with my father, but relieved to be free of Sarah's toxic presence," the day following Sarah's birthday. My phone rang. It was Dad. I almost didn't respond, but a part of me hoped he'd apologize and finally see the truth. "Natalie," he said, his tone stern. "Why did you leave Sarah's party abruptly?" She was very upset. My blood boiled. "That is not what happened." She yelled at me in front of everyone, then threw my gift away. She kicked me out. There was a pause. Then Dad's voice turned cold and angry. "I can't believe you would make up such lies about Sarah. Why are you attempting to denigrate my wife? Please call me when you are ready to apologize to Sarah. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, tears running down my cheeks. That's when I realized I had truly lost my father. The following few years were a blur. I threw myself into my studies. I graduated college with honors and found a decent job. I saw Dad a few times, always remain on neutral ground. A cafe, a park. Never visit his house. About a year after graduation, Jason and I met at work. He was a few years older, nice, funny, and most importantly, caring. He saw me. I was truly seen. Not as an inconvenience or a burden, but as an individual deserving of love and respect. 4 years flew by. Jason and I moved in together, adopted a cat named Muffin, and created a life of love and laughter. Then, one random Tuesday evening, while we were doing dishes after dinner, Jason turned to me and proposed. And with that, I was engaged. As the initial excitement subsided, the reality of wedding planning kicked in. This brings us back to where the story began. I'm surrounded by wedding invitations, trying to decide whether to invite Sarah. In the end, I decided to send an invitation to Dad only. I could not bring myself to include Sarah, not after all that had happened. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a combination of sadness and resolve. I was beginning a new chapter in my life, and I wanted it to be free of the shadows of the past. A week after I sent out the invitations, my phone rang. It was Dad. I responded, expecting the typical awkward small talk. Instead, I received an earful of rage. "How dare you?" he bellowed without even saying hello. "How could you disrespect Sarah like this? You asked me to your wedding, but not her. After everything she's done for you, I couldn't resist." I laughed, a short, bitter laugh that stunned Dad into silence. "Everything she has done for me," I repeated, my tone tinged with sarcasm. "Dad, can you hear yourself right now? She raised you for several years." He shot back. "She poured her heart and soul into love and care." I broke my silence, finally snapping. "When, Father, did she ever show me love or care? Was it when she made me wear secondhand clothing while she purchased designer outfits? Or when she talked you out of buying me a car for college? Oh, it must have been when she threw my birthday gift away and kicked me out of her party. Thank you so much, Robert." I thanked him. The wedding was exquisite. Jason was waiting for me. His face was beaming with affection as Robert led me down the aisle. I saw Lily, my mother, and all of our relatives and friends smiling and crying with joy. I realized then that I was right here, surrounded by all the relatives I could ever need. I decided to post some wedding photos on the internet a few days after the wedding, just before Jason and I left for our honeymoon. Almost immediately, a nasty remark appeared beneath one of the photographs. Sarah responded by saying, "Observe that." Having a stranger walk her down the aisle while her father was not even invited. Disgusting. I continued to stare at the message, filled with a familiar rage, when Jason's fingers touched my shoulder. "You okay, Ned?" he said, his eyes filled with worry. I glanced at my husband before returning my attention to the phone. Sarah's comments suddenly appeared insignificant, trivial, and completely irrelevant. "What do you know?" I surprised myself with how much I meant it. I said, "I am fine. I'm doing better than okay." I immediately banned Sarah's account. I paused for a moment before blocking Dad's as well. It was time to end that chapter of my life.